everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad, Gustafson, and I share two books that we love and we think you should read. When, Brad?
Right now, people, it's in the show name. That's how strongly we believe about the timing of all this.
Right now, not read this later or in 2 weeks or whatever, right now. Brad, I can't help but notice this massive mountain of Dave Pilkey books next to you. Tell me about this.
I'm calling it Mount Dave, and it's always, if I have extra like beaming, smiling joy emanating from me, it's just because I got a book shipment today. So we ordered a bunch of books that kids love, and of course, a lot of those have to be Dogman books. And one of the reasons I'm so excited is a lot of these, probably about half of them, are in Spanish, and I just love the fact that we'll be able to offer that to some of our kiddos.
Yay! I love that. You and I, of course, haven't planned this in advance, as we never ever do. But I just love not only Dave Pilkey books, but I also love his story. I know that we have both had the opportunity to hear him speak before, and the way he talks about how basically he became a reader in spite of school, in spite of all the obstacles that he faced as a reader. He still became someone who loved words and story and has devoted his whole life to helping kids like him do the same thing. He's just super inspiring to me.
So Jen, I think you and I maybe have helped out with reading summits the past few years, and somehow I've managed to time it where I've never been to a summit where he's been at. So I've heard through osmosis from countless attendees and principals who have heard his story, how powerful it is, and how he will literally stop and do anything just to help and to listen. And I don't remember the exact detail, but a teacher was telling me where it had been a long day and he was kind of just talking and signing autographs. And I think even some people who were meant to help him organize and move along with his schedule were trying to help him carry on. And he's like, no, and he just was in the moment and didn't want to go. And I'm just like, how cool is that?
It gives me chills when I think about it. Of course, authors are just real people, just like us, even though they have this superpower of being able to write these amazing stories. But, there are some authors whose names are just so big and well known. There's almost like a hush that comes over the room when they enter. People are inspired just by their presence. And Dave Pilkey is certainly one of them. And yet it juxtaposed that next to his persona, which is just so authentic and down to earth and humble and delighted, just like delighted to do this work for kids and for teachers. I just admire him so greatly, and I'm thrilled that your kiddos are getting access to Mount Dave through this whole pile of books.
It just wouldn't be a show if we didn't name drop just a teeny bit. It reminds me of our friend John Shu. I forget what we were anyway, I was in a hotel lobby with him one time, and here I am like fanboying and appreciating his book, talking through osmosis, being like, I cannot believe I'm in a hotel, like sitting, having a conversation with this guy. And it ended up being like a really long one where he was just there the whole time. And it's like, gosh, that was the greatest hour of my life. So
I know. You know what? Our 3 viewers are going to get sick, but it reminds me of when we got to have dinner that one time with, who's the author that is like escaping me?
Alan Grass.
Yes, Alan Grass. That's it. We got to have dinner with Alan Grass, and I just remember the two of us like looking at each other every once in a while going, is this really happening? Are we really sitting here with Alan?
When are we going to get kicked out of this table? Yes.
Yeah, that 2 of the people here don't belong, and it's us.
We better get to the book talks, because you're right. We don't want to draw, if we lose just 1 viewer, that's like a 33% cut in our ratings.
I know, exactly. So do you want to go first this week?
I do. Jen, before the show, in the pre-show, said, how's it going? And I like paused, and I think she was worried. And I said, good. But I was like my authentic, like analyzing how I'm doing. And the answer is amazing, because for like a zillion different reasons, but our school hired a new media specialist, and that's such a special, powerful thing, and how do you replace someone who is irreplaceable? Well, you don't, but you kind of take your next step together as a school community. We did that. And I was meeting with her and a few other teachers this week, and we were just talking about like what we were reading. And she shared a book and a book talk, and it was so good that I ordered it like right when I went home, and it arrived really quickly, and I was able to read it. Or like I'm halfway through, and it is so ridiculously good. It's not a book I would ordinarily pick out myself or notice, but the way she book talked it, I'm like, dang, that sounds like a book I need to read, and it was, and it is, and I think probably a lot of other people need to read it too. So here, I'm just going to have you picture this, like set the scene from the beginning of the story. So picture you're in an airport, and maybe you're just a passenger or whatever, a customer, flyer, and or maybe you're working security. But however you happen to be there, you notice like an anomaly or a couple who's behaving just a little bit weird. Not that they're necessarily doing anything out of the ordinary yet, but for whatever reason, they catch your attention. And so this is kind of how the book starts out. And this guy who had already caught this person's attention goes into the restroom, and he's in there like a really long time, which isn't, that happens at airports. But he brought he brought something in that the person was like, why? Oh, it was a shower at this restaurant. Evidently it was very fancy. Anyway, just some weird things that weren't adding up, and this person was noticing and just started paying attention, and eventually the person left the restroom. So this other person went in just to be like, like the radar was going off, something's not right. So they were digging around, poking around. They had a security background, like they had some training on some of this stuff, so it wasn't just a weird stalking type thing. Well, they discovered, like they were even checking ceiling tiles because they were worried like there was a bomb or something, and didn't find anything in the ceiling, but in the garbage they found an egg carton. Okay, kind of weird, right? Looked in it, and there was a dyed chicken egg. So that was weird. Anyway, long story short, there were just a few things that were so off, even though the person couldn't tell like what was going on. They assumed it was a bomb. They alerted security. Security detained the person and didn't find anything until they found strapped, I'll get up above the camera, eggs strapped around the chest. Weird, right? Well, such is the nature of this book. It is a world I had no clue. It's the Falcon Thief. And it's like the underground world of stealing eggs illegally. And some of these birds are very rare and they're sought after in other cultures and parts of the world, but at a detriment to the birds. Like they're almost wiped off the planet, peregrine falcons and stuff like this. So the story is, it's this really cool smattering, kind of reminiscent of an Alan Gratz book, although this is nonfiction. It's a story of a detective, his history, his training, how he comes to be also a revered, respected voice in the naturalist world, although he's law enforcement.
Yeah.
And some of the police department kind of looks down on him, thinking that work isn't quite as important as other work, but he knows it does matter and kind of has eternal consequences. But it's a story of Jeffrey Lendrum, and this is a true story, who's one of the most like notorious egg thieves in all of history. And also, as I'm coming to read, like, this is my premature like analysis, either a pathological liar or just something, like he's really good at not getting caught at stealing eggs. Like this is the most crazy thing. Jeffrey and his dad were hired at a naturalist, I'm butchering some of these words, but like at a wildlife refuge in Africa, and became some of the most trusted staff at this place. So they had locations of all the rare nests. I mean, the people who ran this wildlife refuge basically gave them the keys of the kingdom, invited them into studies where they ended up forging and creating data and getting, eventually they got, there were some discrepancies in the data, let's just say. But it is just absolutely fascinating and kind of I don't know how else you say it, like the story and data lover and nerd in me just loves learning all about bird temps, bird velocities, some of the history, because the author, Joshua Hammer, it's not just the story of the detective and Jeffrey, but it factors in some of the history of bird racing and why people steal eggs. Because it's not just Jeffrey, there's a whole underground. So anyway, the good news is I'm only halfway through, so I definitely did not spoil the ending by any means, but I will say this book is ridiculously good and surprisingly entertaining, and you should read it, Jen. Read it right now.
Right now.
Right after Jen's book talk.
I love it. I have a question though to ask. Okay, so you mentioned them being in an airport, but like falconry and that kind of thing is something I associate with a long time ago. But this sounds like it's modern, like it takes place in the modern world.
That's the thing, and I'm so glad you asked. It is from a long time ago, but it's still happening right now. Like this big egg bust was from 2010, but yet they mix in all the history and all. A lot of collectors, a lot of especially the illegal ones, they say, oh, you got this egg at a garage sale, or oh, I inherited this. It's all lies, or most of the time it's lies, and it's hard. Like they also bring in some other egg criminals, and I don't know what else to call them, but people who have broke the egg laws. Sorry, it sounds anyway. Like one bust, the police show up, and no one's responding to them pounding on the door. This isn't Jeffrey. This is a different notorious egg criminal, but the next door neighbor like yells over to the police who are pounding, and they're like, she's like, he's in there, I know he's home. And then the detective's like, oh my gosh. So he kicks in the door. This criminal is crunching up these priceless illegal eggs and trying to flush them down the toilet along with his note cards that are documenting all the rare eggs, trying not to get caught, right? I mean, that's
wow. Brad, I can't believe how completely passionate, like you are so excited about this book. Meanwhile, I'm fighting this like
I had to bring this book to work today just so I could show it to you. Like I did everything I could not to like read it, right? Because I got other stuff I needed to do. So it's been torture having this on my desk all day. It is really entertaining.
You're gonna have to forgive me, as will our 3 viewers, but I can't help but say it sounds extraordinary. Ba-dum-bum.
That's no yoke. You know what? If after that, if we're not down to 1 viewer after that, no one's listening, right?
I don't even know where to go from here. Like that is.
Oh my goodness!
That sounds amazing. Will you tell me the author one more time, though, for real?
It's Joshua Hammer, and he also wrote a New York Times bestseller, which I have not read yet. The Bad A Librarians of Timbuktu.
Oh, I know that book.
Yeah, I figured you would.
I love how you replaced ass with A. So I'm going to say it for everyone. It's the badass. I think we're allowed to say it when it has bad, right? The badass librarians. Okay. That's how our relationship works, Brad, is where I do the swearing for you. I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, I'm going to jump right into my book talk. My book is very different from yours this week, but I got to tell you, just like you were talking about with your book, like that it's not a book you would have normally picked up if somebody hadn't book talked it really well for you. And I feel the same way about that book. Like, I don't think I would have picked up that book myself, but now after hearing you talking about it, now I can't wait. I want to read it. So I'll have to add it to my list. The same is true about this book, although I think if I'd read a little more deeply into this book, it is something I would have wanted to read, but some friends, several people I know have recommended it to me. And you know how that happens when several people start talking about a book, you're like, oh, I need to put this on my radar. You know, I need to bump that up. And I feel that way about this book. It's called The Voting Booth, and it is by Brandy Colbert. And I looked up how to pronounce Brandy Colbert's name, especially after our last week's show when we talked about names. But this book is about 2 kids, Marva and Duke. And I say kids, they're 18 years old, but they're still seniors in high school, and who are about to participate in their first election. Okay. And do you remember that feeling the first time you voted, Brad? Okay. Well, these 2 kids, they live in the same voting precinct, which means they live pretty close together, but they don't know one another. They don't go to the same school. They meet on the day of the election when they're at their polling place, and Marva overhears that Duke is being turned away. that he is not being allowed to vote because they can't find his name on the roster. Well, Marva, like the first sentence in this book is from Marva's perspective, and the first sentence is like, I don't like hyperbolic statements. She wants you to know she does not like exaggerating. And so when she says shortly thereafter that she's been waiting for her entire life to vote for this day, she means it. That's not exaggeration. So she overhears that this is happening, and of course she has to go over and find out what's going on. And Duke is kind of like, yeah, no big deal. I'm just going to go take my calculus test. But Marva is not having it. She's like, we got to figure out where you really are supposed to vote. We got to get you there. And from there, this whole story unfolds where these two kids basically like, you know, experience all of these like hijinks and twists and turns and shenanigans. It's like this screwball comedy where they just meet one obstacle after another between the first polling station and getting Duke to finally vote. But along the way, what also happens is they meet all these people who have different views about voting. They meet people who are like community activists who have devoted their whole lives to getting people to vote. They meet people who think voting doesn't matter, that their vote doesn't really count. They meet people who only vote for the sticker. They just want the sticker so they can take a selfie and, you know, have the social capital of voting. They meet some people who don't vote because they think the system is broken and they don't want to participate in it. Like they just meet all these people who have very different, but often really strong opinions about voting. And so while this book is kind of really on one level, like on the surface level, this kind of romantic comedy about these two teenagers who meet at the polling station. And just as a total aside, there's this awesome subplot about an Insta-famous cat that goes missing, whose name is Eartha Kitty. And I'm 100% there for that. That was awesome. But down below that part, which is funny and sweet and totally relatable, is this story really about disenfranchisement and about how hard it is for some people to vote even if they really, really want to, and about how if a system is broken, it's kind of tough to fix it, right? So it's really just, I think like kids who are in the 7th grade and up would love this book, both because it's funny and smart and fast-paced and easy to relate to, but also because I think you learn so much about democracy and voting and everything in a way that doesn't feel like a book about voting and democracy. So I loved it so much. I'm so glad I picked it up to read it. It's The Voting Booth by Brandy Colbert, and I think you should read it now. And look, there's Eartha Kitty on the back. There. I love it. Love it so much.
That was a nice little detail you added in there for people who appreciate weird subplots like that. You hooked me with that. You know, I'm not very good at remembering to recommend ages, if you haven't noticed. The weird thing is, because this is nonfiction, I would almost say like 5th grade and up. There is, so far, it's been really clean. So
yeah. Well, sometimes too, you know, there's I'm going to become a real librarian nerd for just a minute, but, you know, people know a lot about the Youth Media Awards, some of them, like the Newbery or the Caldecott. People have heard of those awards. Some people may have heard of like the Prince, which is for young adult literature, et cetera. But there's lots and lots of Youth Media Awards for all different categories of books. And there's one called the Alex Award, which is for nonfiction. And then there's one, I might be mixing it up. There's one that's for nonfiction. No, I'm sorry, let me back that up. The Cybert Medal is for nonfiction, and the Alex Award is for adult books that have an appeal to young people.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, so even though the book was published for an adult audience, like it sounds like that one was, it has an appeal for young people. And it sounds like maybe that book would fit into that category.
It totally would. And now you asked such a good question earlier about the time frame. Like, did this happen centuries ago? And I feel bad that I didn't lead with how contemporary it is. It is happening like in present day, but to the point where our school's media specialist even told me there's YouTube footage of Jeffrey Lindblom hanging out of a helicopter to get to access this hard to reach nest. So that's how real and relevant and accessible this story is. It's not just a historical thing. It's like you said, kind of the Instagram famous thing. It has the YouTube appeal too.
Cool. I think it's always great when you can find some kind of connection to the online world in a book. It's just an extension, just a way to extend the experience a little bit more. So I love that.
And I promise this will be my last thing I say about this book. I'm just a little excited, but I'm
I
thinking
could
if I
tell.
were to hook kiddos, I might start by searching for that YouTube footage of Jeffrey leading out of a helicopter stealing a bird egg and just be like, what is the backstory of that? And then pausing and then saying, let's figure it out.
I know. Well, it also made me think about how, when we're able to return to more face-to-face learning experiences, a lot of areas have like raptor societies or places that rescue injured birds. And I've been a part of those experiences at school where they bring the birds to the school and kids get to, have them on their arm or whatever. And what a cool way also to get kids to understand, like, that footage of somebody stealing a bird like that from a helicopter is crazy in and of itself. But once you see the size and the weight and the heft and the unpredictability of those birds, like in real life, I think that adds a whole other layer to how cool and complicated that is.
My friend, I am doing everything in my power to hold back, like going Cliff Clavin on you from Cheers and giving you bird facts right now. I just want you to know I'm doing that. So
I can't believe you made a Cliff Clavin reference. There goes our one viewer. That was it.
I know, there we are, back to zero. Although we should count as viewers, so now we're up to 2. We just had a 200% increase in ratings.
There's nowhere to go but up from here, my friend. Nowhere to go. So listen, speaking of online connections, look at this transition I'm making. If our 2.5 viewers are interested in going back and watching more of our videos or seeing the list of books that we've recommended, where can they go?
Jen, I'm going to answer that with a 10-second story. So this week, Deb said, Brad, do you think Jen could recommend some books for a 5th grader? Maybe she had middle schooler, because for one of our kids.
Yeah.
And you would be so proud of me. I go, Deb, I think we can figure out the list. We should go to bit.ly/read_this_now, and we can find. And then I started doing the plug for the books and the book talks, and she looks at me like, you sound like you've said that before. I'm like, I have, Deb.
I can almost feel her eye roll from here. Like, I love it.
No, she actually went on and she got some books for our kiddos, so we are all set for the school year.
That's awesome. Yeah. In all seriousness, that's like the whole point of that resource, isn't it? So people can go and check out books. I love it. I love it so much. Well, thank you for another great week of book talks, and I look forward to next week. Until then, happy reading, everyone.
Later, everyone. Thanks.